Hello and welcome to the Zanfretta Encounters. To say that I started this video with a different idea is really downplaying that process. I literally had pretty much everything typed out for something else until I realized that this encounter had so much information that it needed its own video. We have a really strange story that was suggested by a subscriber named Space Policeman of Space, so thank you for that. To be honest, it was suggested for a second part to the Alien Encounters of the Strange Kind video, but that didn't work out. So you probably can figure out what this video was originally going to be. Without dragging this out, let's look at this really odd and puzzling story. This encounter is quite involved, and it comes to us from Italy. A man named Pier Fortunato Zanfretta worked at the Institute of Vigilance Val Bisogno, which was a business that hired out security guards. From all accounts, this husband and father of two was good at his job, well liked, but rather shy. On the night of December 6, 1978, Pierre was driving in his patrol car to a residence under his company's protection in the village of Torreya. As Pierre neared the house, his car and radio inexplicably died. This confused the man, but before he could try to make sense of the situation, he noticed what appeared to be 4 lights moving around on the property. Assuming that these must be flashlights from burglars, he grabbed his revolver and flashlight and began to creep along the stone walls surrounding the house. Just as he was about to leave his position to apprehend the criminals, he felt a hand touch his shoulder from behind. As he turned, he saw something that would change his life forever. There stood, not a burglar, but a 10-foot-tall being with undulating green skin staring at him. This creature was described as having yellow triangular eyes, long pointy objects or hairs coming from the side of his head. It had red veins protruding from its forehead, its fingers were rounded, it was also appearing to have a gray tunic on, and it had a strange device over its mouth that Pierre assumed helped in breathing Earth's atmosphere. At the sight of this creature, Pierre dropped his flashlight, but he quickly picked it back up and started to run for his car. As he neared the vehicle, he noticed an intense bright light coming from behind him, and when he turned around, he saw a massive triangular craft was now hovering in the sky. The craft then hit Mr. Zanfretta with some type of heat blast, but he managed to get to his car before it overpowered him. At this point, the electronics in his car were working again, and Pierre managed to call out to dispatch. At 12:15 in the morning, Carlo Toccolino received a call from Pierre. Mr. Zanfretta sounded confused and agitated as he told the dispatcher that he was being attacked. When Carlo asked him for a description of the men attacking him, he responded with, "No, they aren't men. They aren't men. My God, they are ugly." After which the radio went silent. Carlo then called up his supervisor, who sent out 2 other guards to check up on Pierre's last known location. After an hour, Walter Loria and Raimondo Maschia arrived at the scene only to find Pierre laying on his stomach on the frozen ground. As the 2 neared, Mr. Zanfretta suddenly stood up with his revolver in hand and pointed it at the guards. When he didn't respond to commands to lower his weapon, he was tackled to the ground. What was odd was that even though it was extremely cold outside and Pierre had been lying on the ground, his clothes were dry and extremely warm to the touch. The military police were called in, and when they investigated the area, they found 2 marks in the ground that were 9 foot in diameter and were in the shape of a horseshoe. It was assumed that these marks were from the landing arms of the triangular craft. Later it was discovered that on that night, 52 other residents in the village all witnessed bright lights in the sky over the residence where Pierre had his encounter. After being contacted by a reporter named Rino De Stefano, Mr. Zanfretta agreed to going under hypnosis to uncover the truth behind what happened that night. On December 23rd, Pierre met with Dr. Maudo Moretti in Genoa for the process. While under, he found that after making his call to dispatch that night, that he had been abducted by the same green beings. They examined him and informed him that they were from the Teutonia planet, which was located in a 3rd galaxy. Pierre also found out that the device on their mouths were actually capable of translating their speech to the native tongue of the being that they wanted to talk to. Only 3 days later, while driving through the Bulgogi Tunnel near Skofera Pass, Pierre would encounter these beings again. This time while driving at 11:45 at night, he suddenly noticed that he no longer had control of his car. Something else seemed to be operating his vehicle, and it continued to do so for a mile before stopping abruptly on a remote road. As the car stopped, he suddenly was enveloped in a bright white light that was incredibly hot. Much like the first encounter, Pierre called his dispatch, but this time his voice was oddly calm, and he said, "The car has stopped. I saw a bright light. Now I'm getting out." After this call, guards were sent out to check for Pierre. At 1:10 a.m., 2 guards found him sitting in a field in a state of shock, and it was obvious that he had been crying. What was odd was that even though it was raining, his clothes and hair were again dry and warm. When his car was checked, the roof was so hot, it was as if it had been sitting in the direct sunlight for a while. The interior of the car was extremely warm, and oddly enough, the dirt surrounding the car was covered in large 20-inch long by 8-inch wide boot prints. Pierre's revolver was found, and it was obvious it had been fired 5 times, even though he couldn't recall that. Out of concern for his safety, his work hired a neurologist by the name of Giorgio Giannotti to evaluate the man. The results came back that he was obviously in a state of shock, but of sound mind. Due to being hounded by skeptics, Pierre agreed to another session of hypnosis, and even agreed to it being aired publicly. During this interview, it was discovered that one of the green aliens had fired Pierre's gun in some sort of panel to see if the weapon posed a threat to them. It was also shown that he was concerned that his abductors might actually try to keep him. On June 30th, 1979, Pierre was driving his motorcycle through the town of Huerto when he was abducted yet again. After going missing, a search for the man started, and he was found at the top of Monte Fascia. The odd thing is that the road to the top of the mountain is 1 lane, and other guards patrolled the area also. On that night, no residents or guards saw Pierre driving up the road, yet he was found at the top of the mountain. Another hypnosis session was performed, but this time Pierre requested that sodium pentothal, otherwise known as allegedly a truth serum, be administered. I say allegedly since studies are up in the air at how effective the serum is for making people tell the truth. This session revealed that he had been lifted into a spaceship via a green light, where he met the same beings as before. On December 2nd, 1978, at 10:30 at night, Pierre was driving in Genoa, where he was abducted another time. Much like the other encounters, 2 guards went out to find the man, but this time they actually encountered more than they expected. As they approached the area, they noticed a strange, cloud-like object hovering above them. As they watched, it shot out a light beam that caused the patrol car to shut off. The officers got out, and one of them began to fire on the cloud. The lights immediately stopped, and the craft flew off silently. Later, one of the officers was so traumatized by this event that he sadly took his own life. Only a day later, Pierre was filling up his patrol car in Genoa at 9:30 p.m. when he heard the sound of someone calling to him from a dark alley. Mr. Zanfretta later assumed that the voice was being sent telepathically, and for some unknown reason, he felt compelled to comply with the request. As he neared the alley, he saw a tall, bald, reptilian man standing there dressed in a checkered suit with a metal chest plate on. He was then told to drive his car into a small cloud that was hovering nearby. Pierre did so, and he was abducted once again. This time the meeting was more casual, as he was able to actually explore the ship a bit. While on board, he saw 3 large tubes filled with a blue liquid, and each one contained a different being. In the first was an odd frogman type, which he was told was an enemy of theirs from another planet. Many have hypothesized that this could have been the frogman that people around the world have encountered. In the second tube was an odd-looking giant bird, and in the third was a human that appeared to be a caveman. After the tour, these beings wanted to give Pierre an object they described as a sphere that housed an electrically charged pyramid. At first, he refused the gift, but he was told it was meant to enable humans to realize who they were and how they lived. Again, he refused, but they insisted, and informed him that he was to give it to a man named Dr. J. Allen Hynek, who Mr. Zanfretta didn't know. Mr. Hynek was a fairly prominent person in the UFO community, since he was brought on as a scientific advisor for Project Sign and, more importantly, Project Blue Book. Dr. Hynek started his career as a skeptic, but later became convinced that there was something to the sightings after reading over so many reports. So this is an interesting inclusion to the story. Once he was returned, Pierre decided to disobey those orders and instead hid the device in the mountains of Genoa. Following this, Pierre was abducted again on February 14, 1980, but oddly enough this time, he was in radio contact with his headquarters the whole time. Co-workers went out to his last known location and found him suffering from shock and hypothermia. Incidentally, townsfolk did report seeing an illuminated craft in the sky that very same night in that area. They described it as looking like an illuminated football just hovering in the sky. After this event, Pierre was placed under hypnosis again, but this time it was noted that rather than speaking freely, he appeared to be resistant. When he spoke, he would use strange words and utilize an odd tone. Even as such, the things that were revealed in this session were confusing, since he sort of spoke in broken phrases. Pierre was abducted for the 7th time on August 13, 1980, but this time he was in a situation where his activity was monitored 24 hours a day. I'm not sure how anybody knew what was going on, but apparently people arrived before he could make contact with the aliens. After this failed abduction, he was placed under hypnosis again, and this time he confused doctors since he refused to answer any of the questions, even while being under. The only thing he would say was, "Question with negative answer, Tixel." Since that time, there have been no more reports of Pierre being abducted again, and oddly enough, UFO activity seemed to halt in the area as well. Okay, with this story there are quite a few things to think about. The first thing is that while the encounter seems really out there, it is highly known that UFO activity not only was seen by many people all over Italy at this period of time, but many other sightings match times with Pierre's claimed abductions. As stated, the story feels almost too good to be true, but facts that were corroborated make things difficult to dismiss. The prints on the ground, the heated car and interior during a rainstorm, the fact he was warm even in the winter, the fact that police saw and fired on a UFO, the 9-foot horseshoe imprints at the first location. These all make the biggest of skeptics a bit puzzled. I do find it odd that up until a certain point, all the UFOs were triangular, but the moment the officers saw a cloud version, in fact, the very day after, Pierre was now seeing a cloud-shaped one. This very well could be a coincidence, or it could also show gaining details to carry on a story. It should be noted that one day after Pierre saw the man at the gas station, a different encounter happened in Madrid. On December 4th, a dentist named Dr. Alfredo Sanchez Cuesta was driving when he noticed a strange craft with brilliant lights. After a while, the UFO started to follow his car. It did so for about an hour and kept a distance of only 50 feet from the top of his car. At one point, the lights became so bright that the doctor lost control of his vehicle and crashed. This information wasn't widely available, but during Pierre's encounter earlier that week, he seemed to be aware of what was going to happen. In one hypnosis session, he even asked the aliens why they were targeting Italy and other people. Information like this seems to really make the case more mysterious. I think the hardest part to this story is the sphere. Pierre was inundated with phone calls and ridicule from many skeptics to the point it made life hard for him. If these beings did give him some type of sphere containing alien technology, why hide it and not present it to all the non-believers? I don't doubt that something happened in a few of the encounters, but I'm curious how much of it was real and how much of it was made up in his head. Hypnosis, and specifically regression hypnosis, is often used as a tool to uncover the truth behind abductees' encounters, but it is also proven unreliable. Mostly due to the subject being prone to suggestion, or the fact that often information is included that didn't happen at all. In a sense, it can blend your dreams with real events. So as I end this, I was curious, what are your thoughts on this story? Is it all too fantastic to believe, or is this man constantly the target of otherworldly beings? I also wanted to extend a huge thank you to Space Policeman of Space for suggesting this to me, since it is quite an interesting story. I did want to mention that last week, I apparently caused a bit of confusion with changing the way my videos start. I am sure a few of my longtime subscribers are already aware of what is going on. This change isn't permanent. It is something fun that I like to do to switch things up according to the holiday. It is Halloween time, so I have a Halloween intro. I also have one for around Christmas time, but it is honestly less dramatic of a change, at least than this one. So I hope this cleared things up for anyone who was curious. If you haven't yet done so, do please consider subscribing to my channel for more content like this. Also, it would be greatly appreciated if you could share my videos with someone you know who may be interested in this type of genre. With that, be safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Later.